My name is Pastor Scott Griswold, and I'd like to welcome you to Reach the World ASAP, a production of ASAP Ministries. Sopea pulled hard on the rope that hung from the nose of her parents' biggest water buffalo. Her feet sunk down into the mud. It felt good. That was why the buffalo didn't want to come out of the pond. It was just too hot. The fat creature sat back and just kept chewing its cud. Sopea wished her life was that simple. Though she was just a small girl growing up in a Cambodian village, she had a lot to worry about. She loved school. She would go every day that her parents could spare her. She'd gotten cleared to the 5th grade. But they were very poor. She knew her parents would have to pull her out if there was any chance of her making money at some job. One day, the pastor named Sang Sa Min, who lived nearby, called her to talk to him. His wife had noticed her hardworking spirit. Would she work at his house taking care of his elderly mother? They would pay her. She could still go to school and even stay at their home. Sopea was thrilled. 6 years flew by. Throughout that time, she also learned about Jesus and the God who hears and answers prayer. But one day the pastor came and told Sopea that he was retiring. "I can't afford to have you help me anymore." He felt bad. "What do you think you'll do?" "I don't know," is all she could say. Her parents had to send her off to the city of Battambang to search for a job. Pretty quickly, she landed a teaching job in the mornings and tried her best to finish the 12th grade in the afternoons. But it was too tough. After 6 months, she had to quit. She needed another $500 more to get her to graduation. But by now, her parents were convinced that an education was really important. "Don't worry," they told her. "We'll sell some water buffaloes and get you through school." Sopea smiled. Maybe those fat, muddy creatures would help her get somewhere in life after all. It was a huge sacrifice for her family, but it still was not enough. Teachers demanded extra gifts in order to provide tutoring and make sure that she passed. It was going to take another $500. Sopea's sister decided to start working to help fill out the rest. Once when Sopea went home for a visit, she found out her sister was sick. She had a tumor, but instead of spending money for the treatment, she'd been sending all the money for Sopea's schooling. Sopea would not have that. She insisted her sister get treatment, and she herself stopped school. This time she'd have to find a good-paying job. That's when she heard about an opening for babysitting in Phnom Penh with a wealthy Cambodian family. It looked perfect. All she had to do was watch a little 2-year-old. She got the job, said goodbye to her family, went off to the city. The father was a businessman. In a short time, he announced they were all going to go to Singapore. It was a shopping trip, a big shopping trip. For 1.5 months, they shopped and shopped, often as late as 3 in the morning. Sopea was exhausted. One night, she could hardly see straight. They went shopping. The man said, "Take these packages to the car." She piled them high and headed down. The store had 150 floors. When she finally found the car and piled them all in and headed back, she got lost. Where were they? She couldn't find them. It took her several hours until she finally located them, and they were not pleased. They shouted at her and pushed her around like an animal. Finally, they went back to Cambodia. "I want to quit," she told them. "I want to go home." "You can't quit," they barked at her. "If you quit, you'll have to pay $300 for breaking your contract." Sopea didn't know what to do. She'd heard of this happening. So many girls and boys in Cambodia are tricked into a job that looks good, only to find out they are slaves. Long hours, dangerous work, no pay. The businessman hadn't paid her for 2 months. She only had $120. How could she ever get the rest of the $300? Sometimes they worked her day and night. Carefully, she kept saving until she had $250. "Here, take it." He took it all right, but he still would not let her go. In fact, now she knew she was a slave. Every day they locked the gates and the doors. She was never allowed out in the yard. She tried to comfort herself. It could be worse. Many girls are forced into prostitution. That would be worse than a death sentence. But her family, her future, she had to get out. And that's when Sopea began to pray. She'd almost forgotten about the great creator God who could hear prayers, the ones that Pastor Sang Sa Min had taught her about. Surely he was listening, just as in the Bible stories. Couldn't he open her prison gates like he had for Peter? One day she did see the gate opened in the yard. She tried the back door. It wasn't locked. She slipped into the yard. She saw another girl who worked there, and suddenly that girl bolted for the open gate. Sopea just stared and stared, and then she too ran out the gate. She ran and ran and ran until she got to the bus station. Quickly, she scanned the buses and hurried onto the one that was for her province. And then she saw them, the guards from the businessman's house. They were coming after her. What could she do? What would they do if they caught her? She didn't want to stay around to find out. She jumped up, went to the back of the bus, got into the bathroom, locked the door, and leaned against it. That's where she stayed until long after the bus began bumping down the road. When she finally arrived in her province, she cautiously got out of the bus. Immediately, she recognized someone. It was an Australian, a man named Pastor Dean Jackson, the president of the Cambodian Adventist Mission. He'd been to her house before. What a relief. He opened the door to the truck, invited her to get in. He was going that very moment to visit her family. She just began to cry, and her whole story poured out. As soon as he heard it, he said to her, "Sopea, you come work for us. Don't take any jobs like that ever again." And so Sopea became a literacy teacher. 28 students from ages 4 to 16 come and study with her every day. She has them copy Bible verses to learn to read and write. They play games in the yard. They learn to plant flowers and keep the church clean. Shortly after Pastor Jackson offered her the job, she wrote to Phnom Penh for some training. As she looked out the window, she realized she was passing the very house in which she'd been a prisoner. She told us, "I felt no fear. I just felt extremely blessed." First day of the seminar, the theme text was Psalm 91:2. It felt like the summary of her past experience. "I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust." Somewhere out there, while you're listening to this story, Sopea is lovingly teaching a group of children who, without her help, might never learn to read and write. They too might have ended up working as slaves. Instead, they're getting a chance at education. Would you like the privilege of sponsoring a literacy teacher like Sopea? ASAP in Faith has committed to providing $31,020 for the Literacy for Life program this year. That goes to provide 30 literacy teachers like Sopea, a small stipend of $40, and training and classroom supplies. By God's help, would you be able to help with that? You can call ASAP Ministries or donate online. Perhaps God is calling some of you to dedicate yourselves to helping children like this. Children who have a desperate situation, who need a future and a hope. You too can set them free from slavery and poverty by teaching them or helping them have a job, leading them to know the Father in heaven who answers prayers. I hope you'll pray for Sopea and for Cambodia and for children everywhere. Jesus loves them. He wants to love them through you and me. Let's do it. Let's reach the world ASAP.